Hi everybody, Adrian is here. Did you know that the Democrats of Greater Tucson has a website, thedgt.org, and if you subscribe, it's only 20 bucks. You can support this great weekly communication where folks get together. Sometimes there's candidates, sometimes folks like me pop on to help understand what's going on in the world. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, thedgt.org. Join up today.
I'm a bit of an optimist here. I think democracy is strong in the United States of America. I think it is being challenged. I do think that the institutions that are being challenged are being stretched in many ways. But I also think that, democracy derives its power from people. And what we're engaged in right now is and I'd like to refer to it as a slow rolling civics lesson. We are learning more and more about things that we just took for granted for so long. For a long time, active folks may have known who your county recorder was and that there was a county election director. Most people had no idea. And now a lot of people do. Most people had no idea that there was such a thing as the Secretary of State, much less what the Secretary of State did. But now folks know, and that's an important part of this slow rolling civics lesson. So as we see these threats, as folks raise the alarms, as we are watching school districts try to ban books, folks are paying attention. As we watch, these crazy election denialist bills come through the legislature, and we're seeing that it matters that we have a governor who's willing to veto this nonsense. That matters. That's important. And it's important for the broader narrative. So what I'd like to do is offer a little bit of a glimmer of hope, because, boy, sometimes it can be doom and gloom. And, fear sells well, and fear sells well to just about everybody. But I'm not fearful. I'm hopeful. I'm a really hopeful guy. I think that we're seeing some movement in a lot of places. Let me give you for example. And we're not sharing a lot of this information because it's the process that matters. 5 of the 6 bills that my office is promoting this year are sponsored by Republicans. We're effectively reaching across the aisle, even to some folks who folks will raise their eyebrows. Now, nobody's surprised that Ken Bennett is helping me with one of my bills. But a lot of people are surprised that it was Alex Collison who stepped up to sponsor one of the bills that we're moving forward. It's a little bit of an unusual bedfellow, but where you can find common ground, you ought to. And if I can exemplify that behavior, if I can help folks see that it is possible to not hate someone just because of their party affiliation, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's the good example that we all ought to try. Sometimes the good example is just being the registered voter and asking your friends and neighbors and family, are you registered to vote? Asking young people, would you why would you bother dating someone who wasn't registered to vote? That's one of my favorites. Catches people off guard, but if you don't care about your community, you don't care about your state, why are you going to care about me? There's an angle, I think, that might resonate with some folks. And so in our own way across the board, we can do a lot of things. We can do a lot of things to bring folks to the awareness about our democracy, about their responsibility in our democracy that kind of wanes a little bit. So let me talk just a little bit about what we're doing now, 14 months in to the administration here. We're very excited that we got the elections procedures manual passed, drafted, and passed really isn't the right word. It was approved by the governor and the attorney general. They signed off on our work, and it's great. We're really excited about it. And you can always tell how good something is by the people who oppose it. We have 3 EPM lawsuits right now, one filed by the Speaker and the President of the Senate. I don't know that they have standing. We'll see what the courts say about that. The second one filed against us by the RNC. They've got their own issues, and most of that filing is a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of allegations that have already been answered by the federal district court in our favor in other cases. And so I think they're going to have a really, really rough time justifying any of what they're alleging in that lawsuit. And then the third lawsuit was filed by a whole conglomeration of folks under the leadership of the Arizona Free Enterprise Club, which is in and of itself an interesting and fun-loving organization. Let's just be kind today as we enjoy the clouds here in Greater Phoenix. Look, down in Pima County, you guys are doing great work, and I have to congratulate you. I think you've got an amazing county recorder. You've got an amazing slate of Democrats down there. Laura Conover, a dear friend, is running for re-election. You've got all your supervisors up, and you've got some really, really important people. I had breakfast last Tuesday with Senator Priya Sundaresan. She's an incredibly intelligent first-termer. I thought it was her second term, but she's catching on so fast and is so smart in the way that she executes her duties. I know that you guys are going to be challenging our good friend Justine Wadsack. I say that with all of the facetiousness that it requires. And I also know that you all are really kind of the stalwarts down there in South Central Arizona to make sure that we keep electing Democrats up and down the ballot. It is critical that turnout in 2024 be at its peak. And we do pretty well during presidential cycles. We need to do better in the off cycle. So here's a thought as we push through and as you're making your plans for what you're going to do in 2024, let me challenge you. Let me ask you each to think about this. Instead of taking a whole bunch of time off after November, instead of sort of just going out and enjoying the holidays, doing all that stuff, and some of that's great, and some of it's necessary, and all of that good stuff. But when you get your walk lists and you start knocking on doors in your neighborhood and you keep up with these folks, think about this. And some of you may do this already, and that may be why some of the areas in Greater Tucson perform so well. Follow up with those folks. Send them a holiday card or a New Year's card. Make an excuse to reach out. Maintain those relationships, and the relationships that are tangential to those neighbors and those friends and those people whose doors you knock on. See if you can continue that good work that you do throughout 2025. Not on cycle, but off cycle. Because party building and networking and community can be the same thing. You know, you're in the same municipality, you have the same city council people, school districts, the same types of concerns. You're a resource. You who are on this call are the people who care. You understand how systems work where people might not be as aware. You have access to folks like me and other public officials that other people might not have access to. So consider as you move forward through 2024, think about this. What's it going to take to make sure that in 2026, we can keep the ninth floor? What's it going to take to make sure that in 2026, you can reelect a Secretary of State and an Attorney General and maybe a new Superintendent of Public Instruction? Because in the midterms, our drop-off costs us a lot. And that happens because we don't generally continue the push through those odd numbered years and into that next midterm cycle. Boy, I'm asking a lot, aren't I?
No, it's an excellent point, Adrian. Yeah. That's good
And
advice.
so what I want to do is make sure that we're thinking about the big picture and the small picture. The big picture, what do we really want? And then the small picture is, how do we get there? Day by day, contact by contact, person by person. It's not all writing checks, although those of us who collect them, we love it. It's not all postcards or door knocks. It's that personal stuff that you do, you personally, each and every one of you, that we're looking forward to. And I've gone on for a minute or two. I actually don't know how long I've got, but what I'd like to do is stop now, and really didn't talk too much about the office and stuff. Really wanted to focus on you all and be thoughtful today to make sure that we're kind of prepping ourselves, because 2024 is going to be a fight. It's going to be a slog. It's going to be a lot. And I'm super excited, particularly because I know that we are on the precipice. We are on the cusp of having not just a Democrat in the governor's office, the secretary's office, and the attorney general's office. We're this close to having Democrats in control of the Arizona State House and the Arizona State Senate. Boy, doesn't that sound good. Please help us give Governor Hobbs the ruling majorities that she needs so that she can put down that veto stamp and pick up that signing pen. Please give our future what it needs. The future of Arizona's water, our education, our kids, all of the things that we need to continue to be hopeful and continue to work towards that bright future. This is what I'm hoping we can get to. So I'm hoping that we can get there, and I'm hoping that we can all see it through. So I'm happy to take any questions. If someone wants to read them from the chat, I can do that.
Yeah, we're going to help you out, Adrian. Joe Danishevsky here. Thank you so much for coming. Lillian Fox, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a total ignoramus, but my excuse is I registered to vote half of forever ago in Arizona. What are the current requirements to register to vote? What do I need to give or tell people who I want to register to vote what they need to do?
So registering to vote in Arizona requires the following. You've got to first and foremost be 18 years of age or older on the day of the election. So if you're a 17-year-old right now who turns 18, I don't know, like on October 15th this year, you can register to vote. It's a pre-registration and you're only eligible for those elections after your birthday. So 18 or older on the day of the election. You have to be a citizen of the United States of America. And that means you've got to provide some documented proof of citizenship to the state of Arizona. After 1996, the state of Arizona required documented proof of citizenship for a driver's license. And so now that it is required for registration to vote, if you've got a valid driver's license in Arizona, your county recorder will take notice of that driver's license validity and that you have already provided documented proof of citizenship to the state of Arizona. If you don't have a driver's license, you have to provide a birth certificate, a passport, some other kind of documentation that shows that you were born in the United States. And it doesn't matter where in the United States you were born. Also in Arizona, if you don't have documented proof of citizenship, you can still vote. But we have a unique bifurcated system here that indicates that if you do not provide the documented proof, you can still register, but you are only eligible to vote in federal elections. You become a Fed-only voter. And if you do the Fed-only voter registration thing, and eventually later you can attain the documentation for your proof of citizenship, you can take that over to the county recorder's office later and register as a full ballot voter, so you're eligible for all of the state stuff as well. That's pretty much it.
Do you have to go to the county register to vote, or can you just fill out some paperwork and provide copies?
Oh, you did register a long time ago, didn't you? No, Arizona.
Yeah.
Arizona is the first state in the union to have online voter registration. You can go to arizona.vote, or you can go to the county recorder's website, find more information. If you have a driver's license already, Arizona.vote is plugged into the motor vehicle division to pick up all of that extra data and send it out to your county recorder, regardless of the county that you live in. So it's pretty doggone easy here in Arizona. There are still paper forms that are accepted. We in the Secretary of State's office are certifying a variety of other places where we have kiosks now available. The first one that we certified was Indian Health here. Up on Indian School and Central. They've got a kiosk where folks should just walk up and register and vote. So there's a lot of different ways to do it in Arizona. It's actually pretty easy to register and to vote in Arizona. Some folks make big hay of it, but we do a pretty darn good job for our voters. Thank you for the question.
Do we have any kiosks in Pima County that you know of?
Not yet. We just started that very recently.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Steve Linder has a question for you, Adrian.
Hello, Steve.
I've asked this among a number of our speakers. This legislature, the Republicans have learned their lesson about veto stamp, and what they're doing now is making a lot of legislation that's going directly to the ballot and avoiding the veto pen of the governor. And my question is, do you know, are there any legal ways or anything we can do, or what are your plans? Because there's some horrible things they're proposing that are going to to the ballot. And what happens then also is the more things on the ballot, people just tend to vote no. And some good stuff, because the things about women's rights and stuff will also be on the ballot. What are your plans for the things that are going to be sent directly to the ballot?
Well, I have the great convenience of not delving too much into the politics of this election season because we've got to run the elections. So the specific political strategy, generally speaking, I leave to other people. But I will say this. This is a great opportunity to educate folks and to go through and give those voter guides, create those documents that your voters will be able to see and use, that your walkers will be able to distribute among folks. It's a great way to help educate people about the fact that Arizona has one of the strongest citizen legislatures in the United States of America. There are many states where you can't even put an initiative on the ballot. It all has to go through the legislature. We are lucky. Small d democracy is very, very strong here in Arizona, and I'm excited about that. Do we always agree with what gets proposed, like a lot of these referenda? Nope. But that's one of those reasons why I think you're right to ask this question now. We've got to have a broad and very, very solid strategy about how we're going to educate our voters. And I think that's something that you all down in the greater Tucson area do very, very well. So I encourage you to keep up the tradition of solid voter education that you have. Get those, the Republicans up here in some neighborhoods have their golden ticket of who to vote for and who not to vote for. Boy, that would be great to hand out to voters and say, here's what's good for us and here's what's not good for us. And just educate. It's just, that's the contact that we need. Those are the door knocks that we need. That is the work of politics. And so, you know, we have to take the good with the bad. The good, we have a very, very strong citizen legislature. The bad, we have a very, very strong citizen legislature.
Well, Mike Bryan's got his hand up. What do you have for us, Mike?
So I got a couple questions in the chat. Bridget would like to know, can you explain what led to the revision of the elections handbook and maybe what the controversial revisions are that are under questioned in the lawsuit?
Yeah, absolutely. The Elections Procedures Manual is mandatorily redrafted every 2 years. The statute requires the Secretary of State to update the Elections Procedures Manual based on what has passed out of the legislature in the prior 2 sessions. So it's the law tells us we have to redo it, and it also dictates that the governor and the attorney general have to sign off on it. Now, that has been a regular practice in Arizona for a very, very, very long time. And oh, by the way, we're one of the very few states in the union who have an elections procedures manual. And it is a model that is starting to get picked up by other states. Other secretaries are very frustrated sometimes when you have this county over here reading the statute one way and that county over there reading the statute a very different way, because they don't have anywhere that really sort of interprets for the users out there, which are the county election officials, how this thing works. As to some of the issues that we are being sued about, like I mentioned so there's EPM 1, EPM 2, EPM 3. So the second lawsuit of the 3, most of it is just a rehash of a bunch of complaints that some folks had that has already been litigated. I think the lawyers did the RNC a big disservice. And so, you know, at some point, they're going to have their comeuppance with the folks that are funding them because it's a really bad lawsuit. You know, there's a couple of issues. One of the issues is that's raised is that we don't have the rulemaking authority for the EPM. We're supposed to go through a regular rulemaking process that lasts up to 2 years, but that's already been ruled on by Arizona courts. There's a couple of other really fun kind of things that have already been answered. I don't think that the plaintiffs will have much success. I try not to comment too much on merits, but I think we're going to be in pretty good shape when it comes down to the end of it. It's not very good reading, although I wouldn't ever discourage anyone from looking at it. There are 6 counts in I think there are 6 allegations in 2 of the lawsuits, and I think there's 2 allegations in the 3rd one. So if that gives you an idea about how much is going to be fought over.
Okay, maybe bedtime reading, huh?
Yeah. Corinne has a question. What kind of turnout are we expecting for the presidential preference election, which is going on as we speak right now?
You know what? I honestly haven't looked at the numbers. Nicole and I did our ballots today or yesterday. No, this morning while we were waiting for the bus for the kids. And so we're, I think it's going to be low. I don't think it's going to be really high. There doesn't, unfortunately, seem to be a lot of excitement around either of the main candidates. In a lot of the media, we're seeing this called out as a foregone conclusion. I try to participate in every single election that I'm eligible for, and I think a lot of people do. But generally speaking, I think it's going to be low. It certainly won't be anywhere near like 2016. We had great turnout then, but then even at that stage, right, we still had Clinton and Sanders duking it out, and there were still like 8,000 Republicans running or something like that. So, but I will say this: if you haven't gotten your ballot opened up yet, there are several candidates. I'm assuming everybody here is Democrats, but on both the Republican and the Democratic ballot, there are several candidates who have suspended their campaigns or have come off the ballot. But we printed the ballots, we certified the list a long time ago. And so that's just a function of the lag. So I wanted to get that out of the way because people asked that question too.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Corinne has a follow-up. She says, given all the resignations we've been seeing, does every county in Arizona now have sufficient experienced staff to run the general election, in your opinion? And are you seeing any major deficits or problems?
We're not seeing any major deficits or problems. I think we're going to be able to do well in 2024. Most of our big losses were in the top 2 spots: county recorders, county election directors. But in many cases, in fact, in almost all the cases, someone in a little bit lower management was popped up. Some folks in some counties had someone from a different department in the county move over. Here's the interesting thing about that. Even if they're in a different county department, those folks bring a whole lot of know-how. Just being an officer at that level in the county, there's so much bureaucracy and rules as far as procurement and information technology, HR policies, all of the other things that are not specifically election related. Some of those folks already have a lot of that covered. So their learning curve is really just as to election administration. And my office has been doing a hell of a lot of work trying to shore up this lack of experience in some corners, including putting on a big tabletop exercise, which is a kind of a scenario run through, almost like a Dungeons and Dragons for election. Yeah, we throw stuff at people. The other thing that we did, and including artificial intelligence, they generated a deep fake of yours truly. This is not a deep fake. This is actually made. And we've done that. But one of the things we also did, I'll point this out, really interesting. We're working with CISA, the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency under the Department of Homeland Security, and they sent us, and we have in Arizona a physical security agent and a cybersecurity agent. We deployed both of them to each of the counties to do a survey of their physical and cybersecurity, so the counties would know where they are weak. And particularly on the cyber side, look, the Russians and the Chinese, they know where we are weak because they look on the internets and figure it out. But our officials didn't know. And now that we have that survey, I know I'm the only Secretary of State in the country right now that has a full survey of all of my counties. And so I have a picture of what Arizona looks like from those 2 perspectives. And we can deploy resources in the form of what we're calling tiger teams to the counties to help them with this stuff. And that is a pretty successful way that we're really trying to prepare and help folks get things ready when they may not have all the resources themselves.
Okay, y'all set, Mike?
One last question in the chat from John Yoakum. He says, what's the short description or number for the bills that you're hoping to pass this session with Republican sponsors?
Oh my God, I just had my briefing a minute ago, and I think they took all the paperwork with them. Okay, one of them, I'll just tell you off the top of my head. One of them is to help up the bar on notaries public, because we've had a lot of voter mortgage fraud, deed fraud across the state. So We're going to move it up the bar to do some background checking, to have a course that you have to take before you become a notary public. That will grandfather everybody who's already in. So those of you collecting signatures for all of the stuff that's moving forward right now, you don't have to worry about it if you're already a notary. This will go into effect until after 90 days after this session, and by then all the petition stuff will be over. So don't worry about it for this time around. A second bill is a business services sustainability fund bill, where we're going to ask to take a small chunk of the fees that we charge for all of our filings and move that into a fund that we can dependably budget on for updating our networks, updating our information technology, our software subscriptions, things of this nature. We don't have that. So our business services, which is a critical part of this job, is at the whim of the budget from the state. We want to pull it away from that, just like every county recorder in Arizona has an IT fund where they take a few bucks off of each recording filing and drop it into that fund so they can use it for those things. It's just a smart way to run this type of ministerial business, right? Where you just can budget for future years and future spending. We've got a bill for the address confidentiality program. We run an address confidentiality program here that basically hides the addresses of victims of violence and stalking, and we forward all of their mail to them after it's come to us. This is a very important piece of Arizona's infrastructure here out of this office, and all of the federal funding is gone. And so we're asking for some general fund money on that. There's a couple other bills, but I'll leave it at that for now. But we are very happy about where much of this legislation is moving. We've gotten some great results out of the House, and now most of our efforts will shift over to the Senate.
Okay, welcome, Paul Stapleton Smith, and you have a question.
Indeed, Secretary Fontes, we couldn't be more delighted. You're one of the most proactive, inspiring folks that we've elected. Circling back to what you said about party building and looking at voter registration, it seems really difficult to get this party to really be aggressive about voter registration, right? Which goes then to our turnout subsequently and growing, right? Growing. I really appreciate all that you do to inspire folks, but how can we do that? How can we do better, right? In terms of making that a priority, and how are our voting registration trends looking right now? Are they slow? Are they fast? What's your opinion?
The general trend, as I understand it right now, and I'm only looking at the last quarter's numbers through the last part of last year, they're in line with what would have been expected. We're not growing at a very fast clip. It's not slow. And we are coming up into a very exciting period where not just the parties, and honestly, the party used to do a lot of this stuff, but a lot of the political money that goes into voter registration has come out of the political parties and has gone into these third-party organizations, right? Like on the right, they've got Turning Point USA and some of these other groups. We have our own groups on the political left who do a lot of voter registration stuff. In fact, I'm meeting with a bunch of those folks in the coalition this afternoon. So it's become less of a function of the party itself and more of a function of the nonpartisan groups, which frankly disadvantages us, I think, a little bit, because we're not like promoting a particular party when we go out to do those sorts of things. And that's okay. I think we're still growing. Arizona is still growing pretty quickly. So that's a good thing. As far as our numbers are concerned, look, everybody's really grumpy at the parties writ large. Neither one of the political parties is popular right now. We've been losing at a pretty fast clip. The Republicans have been losing voters at a pretty fast clip. And I think there's this kind of a general disdain for institutions. And the parties, generally speaking, nationally, have not done themselves very much good. And so I think politics has shifted to a degree away from partisanship and more into personalities. Just that's kind of a general observation of mine. You know, I'm not wearing my secretary hat now. I'm wearing my political analyst hat. And so what do we do about that? Find great personalities, I guess, recruit good candidates. who can make the pitch. But as far as registration is concerned, generally speaking, the activity itself has shifted away from the institution of the party on both sides of the aisle.
Okay, we have a question from Sandy Sauls. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you, thank you. What role, if any, does your office play in the Attorney General's investigation of the false elector thing?
Happily, I am in a really good spot because our office is not an investigative or an enforcement office. We do a little bit of monitoring and enforcement when it comes to campaign finance. But let's just say, for example, somebody turns in a bunch of petitions that are just like goofy, right? That's not our problem. The law presumes the signatures to be valid. That's up to the political opponent to pursue and prosecute any challenges on these fake elector things. Our office did what our office needed to do and is available to assist in that investigation with data, with witnesses if necessary, but we are not actively engaged in the investigation itself. And it's very important from a legal perspective to have that attitude and that space. And here's why. You don't want your prosecuting agency to be the receiver and holder of the documentation. You want those two functions to be separate. Because if, for example, the Attorney General was the filing office for these things, the certifying office for these things, and everything else, then the Attorney General, the Attorney General's office itself could be called into question as a witness during a potential trial in the future. So the function of getting the information, holding the information, and then sharing it as a witness is really a separate and distinct function. And that's an important concept for folks to realize. I was in the same space as a county recorder. Now, having been a prosecutor and having been a defense lawyer myself, I would much rather be right in the middle of the fight. And I think you guys know me. I'd love to be throwing punches, but this is a ministerial job, and we've got to be above the fray so that we can maintain the integrity of the systems. It's a good question, Sandy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Larry Bodine has a question.
Hello, Adrian. It's really good to see you.
How are you, Larry?
We look forward to having you talk sometime at the LD18 Democrats at one of our monthly meetings. I just want to let you know I already cast my presidential preference ballot. I voted for Joe Biden, but there's one thing that's like really worrying me, and that is there's an Arizona GOP bill that would let the MAGA legislature essentially overrule voters in presidential elections. It was introduced by Senator Anthony Kern. It's CR 1014, and it basically says that the legislature is the exclusive entity to appoint presidential electors. What are the chances of this becoming law?
Well, the chances are slim to none as far as I'm concerned, unless it gets referred. Now, I've called this bill stupid in public places. I'll call it stupid in this semi-public place because guess what? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a stupid bill, Anthony Kern, and it should not have been introduced in the first place. It strikes me how hypocritical the notion behind this bill is, because these guys, particularly the MAGA guys, they claim to be all about the people, and they claim to be all about the people, and that yet they don't want the people to be making any decisions. They don't want the people to be deciding a thing. And when the people do decide, they get all grumpy and they grab their ball and they run home. So, you know, this childishness, this pettiness, I don't think that Arizona's voters are going to fall for it, even if it does get referred to the ballot, to be honest with you. It's just really, really, honestly, it's really, really good fodder for us. And it exemplifies yet again how we are on the right side of things. Just generally speaking, the Democratic Party in Arizona is at the tip of the spear fighting for democracy and trying to save it here in the United States of America. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Because guess what? I'm at the tip of the spear working in that space. So it's an insane bill, and I don't think anybody's going to really. It may not even win enough Republican votes for a referral. That's how bad it is.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, Adrian. Just wanted to convey how much we support you down here in LD 18, in Tucson, and in Pima County. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Okay. Lillian, I'm gonna make sure you get a time for a question, but since you've had one, I'm gonna go to D. Matlin.
Hi, Adrian. I can't thank you enough for what you do.
Thank
And
you.
since you started this meeting with WADSAC, I'm going to get there in a moment. First, I'm in LD 17. I followed the whole process for the League of Women Voters, so thought I could do something to make sure that my LD 11 didn't become any worse, and now it's LD 17. What we determined is the real place that the fix was in was with CACA. And why I'm concerned with that is because they do the list that gets to choose from. And if you start looking at the list they gave the Republican choosers, it was all multimillionaires and attorneys and really professional. They gave the Democrats a list that was college professors and employees and a self-employed surveyor. Totally different capabilities.
Yep.
So that's where I got really concerned about CACA. And now they're proposing lifetime tenure for all of the judges, which would mean we can't in any way fix CACA by the next redistricting cycle. How do we help ourselves with this?
Well, I think one of the best ways that we can do it is give Governor Hobbs the majority in both houses that she needs. That's kind of an easy fix. The other thing too is, Arizona's got a long history of swinging in different directions, and we were the first state to have an independent redistricting commission. I've already mentioned online voting. We've been at the fore when it comes to getting people involved and putting people out front, even with our ridiculous kind of cartoonish history of the recent past. And so when it comes to these specific devils in the details sorts of things, like what you're talking about now, I think this is yet again, and it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, this is another piece of that very important civics lesson that we are engaged in right now. And I'll be really honest with you, I think we had a horrible, horrible performance in the last census. I know we had a horrible performance because there's a part of the state down in the southwest corner, down the Somerton, San Luis area, and they've got like four new high schools and 10,000 new homes in one of those communities down there, and they showed almost zero growth. And that's insane. But that's the numbers we got. I wouldn't be surprised if after the next census, we have 2, if not potentially 3 new congressional seats here in Arizona. Get ready for that. So this is a really, really important topic, and we certainly don't have time to cover it all today. But you're right to bring it up. You're right to bring awareness to it, and I want to make sure that folks understand it all goes back to the whole thing. The legislature is important, but so are the school districts, so are the boards of supervisors. It's all a big deal. And the folks on this call know and care. And we've got a duty to continuously push, even after Election Day and through our odd numbers years, which has been our weakness for a long time. So thank you for bringing that up. And I kind of danced around the outside of it a little bit because not something I've put a hell of a lot of thought into, but I should.
Just
Well,
a
and
clarification
I saw
for
somebody
folks.
asked what CACA was. It's the
Yeah,
Commission on
thank you.
Court Appointments.
Yeah, it's
They
Commission
might
on
want to
Court
think about
Appointments. Yeah.
changing that acronym.
Yeah.
No, I don't want it changed. It fits. But
Yeah.
But every time you said it, I cringe.
yeah. The one thing I wanted to say is that the Arizona Democrats have set up the Census and Redistricting Committee. Fortunately, I'm working with it. And so we are preparing this time where we didn't last time.
Good.
Good.
And let's make it a permanent fixture because we've got to be well prepared, well ahead of time. Thank you for that important information.
I have a friend who spent a significant amount of time in prison. What are the exact steps somebody who has a felony record needs to go through to register to vote?
Well, here's the fun thing about that. Arizona is supposed to be an automatic reinstatement state. That the statute actually has the word automatic in it. Unfortunately, that's not how it actually works. I can't get into all of the exact steps right now, but what I will say
Okay.
there will be a petition that'll have to be made to the Superior Court. The Superior Court will then issue an order. That order will then be taken to the county recorder, and the county recorder can reinstate the individual back onto the voter roll. Seems really cumbersome. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a good chunk of paperwork. There's requirements too that have to be done with their probation. I think they've got to be done with all their restitution as well. Not something I've looked at in about a year and a half or so, but we were trying to get a committee together as a result of the elections task force that was in effect last year. That activity was suspended. That particular corner of the activity was suspended, but it's certainly another one of those things that we should look into, making it a little more easy. The thing is, to get it to where it ought to be automatic, and I believe it should be automatic, unless you're actually incarcerated. And some people would go even further and say, even if you're incarcerated, you should be able to vote, and that's fine. We could, have differing opinions. It would probably take a pretty significant data transfer as between a variety of different spaces. So you got your county recorders, your Superior Court, the Supreme Court, and the Court of Appeals, the various different county administration spaces, including justice courts and so on. So it's a tall order. That might be a ways in the coming to make it as automatic as it ought to be, or as the statute contemplates. But I think given the right political motivation, we might be able to do that, but that'll be a technological lift as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Susie Anderson, I'm glad you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Fontes, Adrian, it's a pleasure to listen to you and your points of view. When you're working with the legislators who are of the other party, okay, you mentioned Ken Bennett. What I see of him is a little more reasonable individual. He seems to be a little more thoughtful. Are there any others of that ilk in either house that you can work with?
No, just Ken. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, there's plenty of them, and I wouldn't be doing them a lot of good by calling a lot of them out. My relationship with Senator Bennett, a lot of people recognize because he is a former Secretary of State, and he has a personal affinity to this office. But the politics on the right are so poisonous and so they're just such jerks to each other. I mean, we have infighting. Everybody knows that. Every family has its, that wild uncle that shows up once in a while and you're like, really, dude? But those guys, it's like all the time, all over the place. And so the answer to your question is yes, there are several others, both in the House and in the Senate. And I want the ones that I can work with to stick around for a while, especially the ones that represent some deep red districts where we just don't have a realistic shot. I'd like to keep some of those guys around for a while in case we don't end up winning either of those majorities, because I got to get work done. Like, I cannot be an ideologue. I cannot be, pounding on the table and insisting that I'm right, even if I am, and get stuff done. That's just not how it works. So out of respect for some of those folks and using a little bit of political wisdom, I'm going to not name them, but they do exist. They are generally good people. We just disagree on a bunch of stuff, and that's okay.
Yeah, they'll probably get swatted if you said their names on here.
Oh yeah, for sure. But Adrian, one thing as you were doing a great job articulating. We live in the age of extremism, and the Republicans don't have a monopoly on it.
Yeah.
Just look at what's going on in Michigan right now.
But they
Yes.
do have the market cornered.
Well, I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah, and I think, look, I've been around long enough to know that it comes and it goes, and I just think that good people of good conscience are really getting sick and friggin' tired of these guys, and at some point, reasonableness is going to win. And look, we already have good evidence of that arising. In 2022, we didn't get an election denialist in the U.S. Senate. We didn't get an election denialist in the governor's office or the Secretary of State's office or the Attorney General's office. When the vast majority of people have a chance to speak, they speak for clarity. They speak for reasonableness. They speak for folks that have clear heads and are going to look at facts, not fiction. So that's where I draw a lot of strength from, and that's where I draw a lot of hope from, too.
On the U.S. Senate race, how many folks actually are going to be on the ballot? Has that been settled, or do we still have some time on that?
Are you asking me if Kirsten Sinema is going to run? Is that the question?
Actually, I wasn't thinking Kirsten, but about a lot of other folks who filed. But
here's the way this works. Because of the change of the dates in the 2750 whatever that bill number that made the adjustments for the safe harbor dates, moving the primary date, we will have a good idea after April 1st, because all of the petitions are due April 1st, even non-party designated candidates. They've got to have their petition in on April 1st, even if they don't have a primary, and they would move directly to the general election.
Okay.
So just kind of, hold on to your socks for another few weeks, picture of it. And we can sit around and have some beers and figure out how we're going to win after that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
I have
Mike.
another question. Excuse me. So Adrian, one of the things you talked about a surprising amount when you were campaigning was the changes that you wanted to make to record keeping administration. You were very concerned about, just a warehouse gathering dust and, not having the public not having access to those records. What kind of progress have you made on that kind of more strictly administrative front?
What a great question. I just happen to have been briefed on that today.
Really?
Oh yeah. So my business people brief me, and my business services guys. Here's one of the things that we showed up to. We literally had bankers' boxes, dozens and dozens of them, probably close to 100 of them, stacked up in offices down on the second floor, stacked in the hallways. And when somebody needed to get a document, they had to go find the banker's box, fiddle through it, pull it was ridiculous. Well, we've scanned almost all of those into a system that we're redacting right now. Hundreds of thousands of documents. We're 97% through right now. I'm reading off this, so sorry if I'm not looking up. We're 97% through right now, and we have estimated that just that act alone will save me 0.25 of an FTE. That means 1/4 of an employee a year will be able to do some other work, because they're not going to have to sit there fiddling through file boxes and moving boxes around. Isn't that insane?
That is great.
That's how this was operating. Moreover, once we get the information redacted off of the microfiche that we have going back into 1980, once we get the information there scanned in and redacted, we should be able to save at least another 1/4 of an FTE. And that means 1/2 of one employee, hopefully by the end of this year, maybe in another 15 months or so. We're still working out when that's going to all happen. We'll have saved 1/2 of an employee's worth of time every year by digitizing work. This is the kind of work that should have been done ages ago, but nobody ever pays attention to these things. We have, and we're looking for a federal grant to take care of that, which I think we're going to be successful at, because we've got some folks that are doing that sort of work now. We have now, and I'll let you guys know right now, we've opened up the counter to public walk-ins here in the Executive Tower in Phoenix. It was closed for longer than the United States was in World War II. And we were only serving 10 customers a day via appointment. That is now 120 customers a day. And by the way, Greater Tucson Democrats, hold on to your socks again, because well, you guys are all losing your socks today. Isn't that weird? We are working right now diligently. And I hope, I'm gonna find some Raul Castro's old desk to knock on here. We will be opening the service counter for public walk-ins in Tucson at the state building. We will have a grand opening here in Phoenix soon. And we're going to be doing that in Tucson because look, business services are vital to the economy.
Adrian, we were out at a peace fair, here in Tucson, and Robert F. Kennedy had quite a presence, Jr. And how hard is it for him to get on the ballot as an independent?
It's not going to be that hard to get on the ballot as an independent for the presidential race. The barrier to entry for the presidential race is low. But I mean, look, that guy's just a wackadoodle. I mean, he stands for nothing, and I don't understand how he would have the temerity to just run on his family name and really besmirch such a good name the way he has. I think his dad and his uncle would be mortified to see what he is proposing to do to stand as a spoiler and potentially help get Donald Trump elected back into the White House. It's a shameful and embarrassing thing for the Kennedy family.
Amen.
And if anybody asks me how I feel about that, you could just replay the tape on this. But I will also say this, and I will spare you the long goodbye. It is an honor and a privilege to serve as your Secretary of State. I'm so grateful to those of you who worked so hard to help me get here. I do not forget, and I very much appreciate it. We're working very diligently here at the Department of State for the state of Arizona, for all of you, for everyone, even all the folks who would never come onto this call because they're Republicans.
Great.
We're all one state. We're all
one
one
last
humanity.
question. Would that be okay?
You got less than 2 minutes, yes.
Okay. Andrea Kennedy, question, answer, 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Well-
Oh, you can answer this in 2 minutes. So there's been lawyers that are saying that not having the former president on the ballot would disenfranchise the voters. And it occurred to me to wonder, if he wasn't on the ballot, couldn't they simply write him in?
I think that people that are saying that are very, very frothy at the mouth supporters of his in the first place, because what they're saying is even if the law applies to him, keeping him off the ballot just doesn't feel good. And so they're crapping on the rule of law when they make those statements. And so I don't think those lawyers are making legitimate legal arguments. I think they're making raw political arguments, pretending to couch them in the law. That's disingenuous. And I think it's dishonorable for those folks to be making that argument.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's true. Could they write him in though? Could they write him in?
Sure.
You can write in Mickey Mouse if you want. Nobody's going to count it. If it's not a qualified candidate, you can't count you can't count.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Adrian, thank
Just to
you.
clarify, Adrian, you don't have any control over who appears on the presidential ballot.
No,
Right.
no. The statutes tell me what to do. I am a minister.
Okay. Well, did you have any last words or?
I do.
Okay.
Stay the course. Keep up the fight. Do not let the bastards get you down. Use all of the energy you've got, and then when you run out, borrow some from the person next door, because we have to win up and down the ballot, and you all are going to make it happen for us down in Southern Arizona.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
And with this visit, you are such a great public servant. We really appreciate all the great work you're doing as Secretary of State, but we are keeping an eye on our socks. So.
Yes, please do. You guys have a great one. Thank you so
Okay.
much, everybody.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you so
us.
much, Adrian. Appreciate it.
Hey everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. As all of you know, Arizona Democrats have had a lot of important wins over the last few years. We won 2 U.S. Senate races, and we delivered Arizona's electoral votes to President Biden and Vice President Harris. we elected Governor Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. Now, those elections were close, and our victories mattered. Arizona Democrats from the federal to the local level have delivered real results for our state on critical issues like combating climate change, lowering prescription drug costs, protecting the right to vote, and preventing more restrictions on abortion access. The Democrats of Greater Tucson offers the opportunity to hear from elected officials and candidates about that important work and the issues that matter to them. That information will be invaluable as Arizonans head to the polls. So this election cycle, whether you're signing up to knock doors, make phone calls, or joining the Democrats of Greater Tucson to hear from and speak to Democrats in our area, please know that your voice matters and we need you on this team. Thank you.